Hello everyone, it is Geojim and I'm here in the geology lab at Northern Virginia Community College doing a little bit of fossil prep. Right now on this specimen right here, this very handsome scallop, it came from the Calvert Cliffs along the Chesapeake Bay. It's probably anywhere between 10 and 20 million years old. And what makes this one kind of unique is the fact that we have both halves of the original scallop pretty much intact. Normally when these bivalve organisms die, their shells are only held together by muscle, so they disarticulate and come apart. But in this instance, we have the full specimen nicely preserved. It's bound right now by some very fine sediment, so this would suggest that this animal died in situ, basically in place in a very calm, low energy environment, such that there were no strong currents to whisk away the shells and send them off on their separate ways. But rather the organism stayed intact. It did, of course, die, and it did open up its shell a little bit, which allowed the fine sediments to spill in. So what I'm doing with this specimen here is I want to keep it intact and not have it come apart. And that would eventually happen, because even though it is currently somewhat cemented by all of this fine mud and sediment in here, eventually that's going to dry out and these things will come apart. So I'm using just a very simple 50-50 mix of Elmer's glue and water. And we're basically going to drop that in between the seams and in the openings where there is sediment and allow that to soak in. And that's just going to give a little bit of extra binding to this particular specimen. The glue essentially will be invisible to the naked eye. And my hope is that it will just do a little bit of be a bit of an aid in making sure that this specimen does in fact stay intact. Whew, all this work is making me hungry. So as I've been working on this specimen here, I've been collecting some of the sediment that's been spilling out from it because I have been losing some of it, which is why we're trying to glue it together. But let's take a look at this sediment under the microscope and do a little sediment evaluation. All right, so here's a look at the sediment under the microscope from the scallop. There is my pinky finger for scale. It's very blurry. Let's see here. You know, there's a little bit of shell material, so other organisms, but you can get a sense this is some very, very fine sediment. There's a few larger pieces in here, but it's all relative. Even the bigger pieces are still pretty small. And there's a lot of finer stuff in there. Let's see if we can zoom in just a little bit more. And now we can maybe do a little bit better job at identifying what some of these grains are. It's mostly quartz. These are small grains of quartz sand. So this is still, I would say, you know, based on my rough estimation, roughly still qualifies as sand size material. You know, we're not into the silt or clays quite yet, but we're close. But you can still see there are there's a nice large grain of quartz there. Again, all things relative. Very few dark grains, so a few maybe remnant dark minerals in there. Those dark minerals tend to be iron and magnesium rich, and they don't stand the test of time as well as quartz, which is a very physically strong and chemically stable mineral. And so that's why you end up with a lot of quartz-rich sand. The other minerals essentially disintegrate or weather away, dissolve, and you're just left with quartz mostly. Well, this was fun, but I think we're good to go now. We're going to just let this dry out, let the glue do its work. We'll come back and check it later, and hopefully that will keep this lovely, handsome scallop intact for the long term. And so future students will be able to enjoy.